we fundraise, we're tailoring our communication to each individual donor. And yet, data can be helpful for our fundraising planning. And that's what we're going to do today as we welcome back Lindsay Marciniak, who's the managing partner of CCS. They've come out with the 5th edition of their annual report, their Philanthropy Pulse Report. And Lindsay, thanks so much for being back with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be back.
So what is this report? Tell us a little bit about the methods before we get to the findings.
The Philanthropy Pulse Report is a survey of organizations in real-time experience. This year's report reflects responses from 618 distinct nonprofits across 47 states and 18 different countries. And this survey looks at both the real-time results of fundraising from the previous year, and importantly, also looks ahead to the projected ideas and areas of focus where nonprofits may be spending their time and energy for the year ahead.
And we need to point out nearly every state in the United States is involved in this study, also 18 countries. And so there's an international flavor to these data as well. What were some of the findings that stand out this year?
One of the most encouraging findings was that 62% of organizations reported increased revenue in the previous year. And that's particularly notable given the many dynamic changes that are happening in the world, with government policies changing, with different donor trends emerging. We're encouraged to see that writ large, organizations are continuing to grow their fundraising.
And I do want to just amplify that comment you made about context. You know, there's still a lot of economic uncertainty in the United States and around the world. Inflation is not at double digits anymore, fortunately, but it is still weighing on people's minds and on their spending decisions. And people wonder about, is there going to be a recession and all these different types of things? And yet, we saw an increase in the Giving USA data from 2024 to 2025. And in 2025, this report shows that 2/3 of nonprofits saw additional revenue growth. So, Lindsay, I see data like this, and it just speaks to the generosity of donors when they are invited to contribute to our organizations.
That's right, Bill. When you look at philanthropy over time, we know that philanthropy is more resilient than any other economic factor like the S&P 500, which is certainly signals more extreme and more frequent swings. That said, we know that one of the key aspects to ensuring that continuity and resilience of fundraising and philanthropy is really built around stewardship. And stewardship can be broken into so many different parts. But when we look at stewardship related to this report's data, I want to highlight some of our trends in retention. Donor retention is and always will be such an important factor in where we look ahead. In this particular Philanthropy Pulse report, nearly half of respondents, 44%, cited that their average retention rate of all of their donors is somewhere between 30% and 60%. Now, that is a wide range, but it centers right around that national average retention rate of 47%. What's also really important and notable is that organizations are looking to retain donors in both very bespoke ways through small group meetings, individual meetings, but also more broad-based communication. In fact, 69% of all organizations plan to support their donor retention through targeted digital communications, which also speaks to the importance of technology and digital in this world of fundraising.
And if I could just add a quick comment, we see these data about donor retention, and unfortunately the studies don't say, what's your donor retention and what have you been doing to try to retain these donors? Because we know there also is research that when we are very intentional about donor stewardship, donors tend to come back. And so we can't just look at those data and say, oh, 40% come back, 45% come back, woe is us. Well, what are your donor retention strategies? What are your donor stewardship strategies? If you devote that kind of time, and as we've talked previously on this podcast, Angela Altimore is one of the folks who've come up with this, that we need to let everybody understand donor stewardship is the fundraising that's happening in between the asks. And when that happens, those donors tend to come back and stay with us for the long term. And the board also plays a role, Lindsay, and this study provides some data on board engagement.
Boards are so critical to the work of every organization, as we well know. And what we see in this report is that clarity in how boards can be active in philanthropy is a driving factor to fundraising success. So the data specifically shows that organizations that provide clear expectations of their board members, that can be activities, give or get requirements, also reported correlated higher revenue in the last year. And we know that the ways board members will participate in fundraising will differ across organizations. And when we ask specifically how board members are most commonly engaged in fundraising, just over half, about 52% of organizations report that board members fundraise what they call occasionally. And then on either side of that equation, only 14% report very frequent involvement in fundraising. And the other side, 28% say that board member participation in fundraising is rare, with 6% reporting no participation at all. And so that is a notable trend line. Beyond the board members' engagement in fundraising directly, we also need to remember that board members can be involved in philanthropy in a whole spectrum of ways. And that's where the clarity of roles and opportunities comes in, where we know board members can be involved in donor stewardship, offering thank yous. They can be involved in helping to open doors and make connections, or simply give advice in an area of their own professional expertise. So we can really feel confident in knowing that the most important first step and factor is really driving clarity with board members from the time of recruiting a board member to onboarding a board member, or even frequent reminders of board members through board retreats and other meetings.
Clarity in expectations. We have an entire course at the Fundraising School on board engagement with fundraising, research, evidence-based, and boards are discussed in each of our 27 courses, and the class just takes over when we start talking about boards. Oh, my board, this is good. I have this challenge, and wow, the conversation just takes off. To back up what Lindsay's saying here, there's research that shows when we communicate clear expectations to our board members for donating and for fundraising, they are 11 times more likely to donate and to fundraise. 11 times. That's how significant the expectation factor is. And as Lindsay said, then there's the connection when the board is donating, the entire nonprofit benefits with more revenue over time. And Lindsay, you've been a consultant for a while. You're a veteran. You have a lot of expertise. I've always wondered, when people hear these data about the influence of expectations and that board members follow through, why don't more nonprofits communicate expectations for donating and fundraising when people join their boards?
Bill, it's really interesting to engage with our different client partners because, first and foremost, every organization is on its own journey in terms of board education, board awareness, board growth, or even in some cases, some changes to board governance. What we often find is that there can be an assumption that board members know or should know things, when in reality, we can really never assume that requirements are known, especially in this age of high traffic information flow being able to clarify, repeat, engage with board members regularly is so critical. And in our work with so many different client partners, we're seeing a conversation and a willingness emerge from both board members and staff leaders in coming together around this topic and really inviting an open dialogue and a transparent understanding of why board members' involvement is so important. They provide the credibility that no other individual can. And also for staff leaders to be able to share ideas and ways that board members can be most helpful to augment and complement their work. That open dialogue may seem simple, but making space for it can be really energizing for board members and staff leaders alike. And beyond that, really where we can show from a peer-to-peer perspective where board members have taken an example or two of how they've been involved can also be a way to maybe remove barriers or any of those myths that some people may have around what it means to be engaged in fundraising when you're on a board.
And the fundraising school for decades has been publishing the textbook Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. And what's going to happen next are some topic specific books within that series under that banner of Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. The very first book is going to be on board engagement with fundraising. Your board members need to be your first donors, your first fundraisers. We need to communicate those expectations to them. They tend to respond to those expectations, and we raise more money as a result. And Lindsay, as we get back to the Philanthropy Pulse survey and study, now in its fifth edition, what did the respondents say about AI and technology?
Well, we know that AI has been and remains a hot topic in the world of fundraising and well beyond it. When we look at this data, perhaps the greatest summation of the trends is that while organizations remain curious and open to AI practices, very few are regularly incorporating AI into fundraising systems or work. We're most commonly seeing nonprofit organizations really dabbling with different ideas. So close to about half of the organizations who responded to the survey are not using AI at all. And it's often not because of attitude or willingness, it's simply readiness. So organizations that invest in training, governance, or quite simply AI policies for the organization, and really demonstrated adoption from leadership really are able to move beyond that ad hoc experimentation into more regular test use cases that could be grown and scaled. And when we think about how AI is most commonly being utilized now, we see that it is in nonprofits survey results from the Philanthropy Pulse, half report that it is being used to enhance personalized donor engagement, often through writing and proofing content.
And so the onboarding of AI is still in an earlier stage in the nonprofit sector. And Lindsay, I need to ask you this. You talked about, pointing ahead to future trends, and I want to ask you to summarize those in just a moment here. But I just want to ask you about fundraising consulting. We know in the private sector, when we hear about potentials for job loss or job dislocation or job changes, one of the first industries that gets discussed is the consulting industry. These wonderful, brilliant folks who come into a private sector company and help them tune things up. How about in our sector? What are some of those discussions that are happening in your industry? And I ask because at the fundraising school, we receive that question all the time. Hey, I'm thinking about bringing in a consulting firm. What are the types of questions I should ask? What should I be watching for? What are maybe some of the flashing yellow lights I should be concerned about? How is AI going to affect consulting for fundraisers? What's happening now? What do you think is going to be happening in the future?
In the case of fundraising consulting, We always want to be incredibly mindful that any one of our client partners coming into an engagement with CCS is needing and wanting to steward their resources well. And so, in thinking about how to really bring on and catalyze programs and fundraising, often where we see the most common interest and readiness for engaging in our services. That said, within a fundraising industry, whether it's consulting, whether it's in-house fundraising, or even in some cases policy or granting, AI allows an opportunity for efficiency and information flow at a different rate and pace. And so it's not necessarily about a binary yes or no, we're replacing something, but rather it's a tool that, when harnessed, can really make sure that the work or information of any one idea can be made efficient and streamlined so that it can optimize other possibilities. We know also from this survey that the number one challenge to staff retention is high expectations and burnout. We know that employees of nonprofits, especially fundraisers, work hard and burn the candle at both ends every day for the missions they serve. And so when AI can be a tool and a resource to help streamline efficiencies and allow people to do what they can do best, which is building relationship and advancing the mission, that's where things can really start to sing. And that's the guiding post that we at CCS bring, whether it's introducing tools like AI, or if it's introducing new systems in your CRM, or new findings from a data analysis, or even a new way of approaching donor messaging and communications. The idea is, how can that tool help optimize your time and free up the chance to build relationship and advance your mission?
And Lindsay, that's consistent with the conversations we've been having here on the First Day podcast for the fundraising school, that more often than not in our sector, AI, at least for now, is an enhancement, not a replacement. It can enhance our work. And as my good colleague Andy Price is on the podcast, he leads a scouting organization in Arizona. So he said, Bill, name me one nonprofit that has workers sitting around with nothing to do. It's the exact opposite. They have too much to do, and hopefully AI can help bring some balance there. Some other future trends you talked about at the top of this conversation, that the Philanthropy Pulse survey points to the future. What are we seeing in the future from these data?
We're looking at a couple of different trends that are emerging. The first is where organizations cited their ability to grow their fundraising revenue in the next year. And perhaps unsurprisingly, but very importantly, most organizations see major gifts and mid-level donors, both expressions of individual giving, as one of the top areas that they plan to grow and invest for their fundraising in the future. And we also saw that there's a lot of focus being placed now on non-cash assets. Now, this is another space where individual giving really comes in as an important component. We see that organizations who can offer opportunity for what we call blended gifts, some combination of cash assets or planned gifts, are able to respond more nimbly and or diversify their revenue sources for the purpose of growth. And in the survey right now, in the 618 responses, half of respondents reveal that at the present moment, no revenue or a very modest amount, up to 10%, comes from non-cash assets. So there is opportunity to explore how non-cash assets coupled with a focus on mid-level and individual giving, can really help to drive fundraising growth moving forward. Certainly not to the detriment or to ignore other sources, though the data shows us that those are some areas that are really coming forward. Again, unsurprisingly, donor-advised funds are a continued area of focus, another expression of individual giving. 95% of respondents in this survey reported familiarity with DAFs, meaning that there is an increased conversation happening. And we saw a strong correlation between staff fluency in donor-advised funds and the share of donor advised funds revenue that an organization receives. That may seem obvious, but it points to the opportunity to continue to speak with donors and ask questions about their own giving vehicles and preferences. And then lastly, I would mention that another key area of focus that organizations are considering is really looking at their staff systems and structures, knowing that efficiency in those development operations is so important to build structure and data that is the foundation upon which so much more of the fundraising work is built on.
A look back at the most previous year and a look ahead to trends and opportunities. Lindsay Marciniak is the managing partner of CCS at their headquarters in Chicago. Lindsay, great to have you back with us on the First Day podcast.
Thanks so much, Bill. And for all of you who are excited about the data, we'd love to hear from you on what resonates with these trends and, importantly, what may not. And we hope that these data really help to inform your own strategies and ideas moving forward.
Well, and these data and from other reliable resources are within our courses at the Fundraising School. In fact, we talk about it being our strongest comparative advantage is that wherever possible, our curriculum is informed by research and by data. 27 courses in all, and those lead to 5 certificates. We're in person in about 12 U.S. cities now. And of course, around the world, you can reach us online. We have customized training that we can design specifically for you. We have quarterly webinars and this weekly podcast. And I mentioned the textbook earlier, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. All this information is available online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. Our producers today are Mike Anthony and Jennifer Boffman. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.